guys, Jay here. Welcome to Eons of Battle. There's a dirty little secret in wargaming, and that is miniature agnostic games because, and they don't tell you this, all wargames are miniature agnostic. There's no wargaming police. You can push buttons and pennies around the table, and that is completely fine. One of my favorite proxy miniatures of all time is this little Scoopy. We were running this as Sean's Chaos Chariot. And this is Scoopy. It's a mascot for a local chain of restaurants. And doesn't he look like a Chaos Chariot? I've blown Scoopy up so many times. But this is the bleeding edge of proxy models. This is probably what you should not be aiming for. Now, it works great if you've got the right friend group. Like, we love playing with Scoopy, and honestly, it was kind of sad when Sean actually got his chariot built and we started using the real model for games because Scoopy wasn't appearing on the battlefield. He's on a magnet base, and so we actually stick him in the ceiling just so that he can watch over us and watch us wargame. But you can always do this if your opponent agrees on it. Sometimes it's fun to use your cat as a Warlord Titan, or to use a box of cereal as a Baneblade tank, especially when those kits are really big and expensive and you probably would only play with them once in a blue moon. I think it's perfectly fine to just grab whatever nonsense and use that in your war games. But for really playing war games, I think there are some scenarios where you would want to use a proxy miniature. Sometimes a fake mini can be better than the real thing. I have this Eversor Assassin, and this is a proxy model that is designed to look a bit like the Eversor Assassin. I think this guy looks more like an Eversor Assassin than the real Eversor Assassin. He looks like a crazy guy who's going to charge in, wreak absolute havoc, and then literally explode. His shoulders are his shoulders are big ram plates. His legs have been gotten rid of and replaced with like sprinter's legs. He's got these crazy claws with just guns haphazardly welded onto the side of it. This is more Eversor-y than the real Eversor Assassin. Although I also have this proxy Vindicare model, and he's kind of just a guy, just a normal kind of generic soldiery man with sniper rifle. And so I ended up getting the real Vindicare Assassin. And I think I probably will go back and just rebase this guy because I really do like him as my Eversor Assassin. And so, I do like the real Eversor Assassin model too, but I kind of like this guy more. So I'm just gonna use this guy. Now, that will cause some problems for me if I'm ever trying to play a game of 40k at Warhammer World in Nottingham, because they have very specific rules that you should only use Games Workshop minis at Games Workshop, but I don't plan on ever doing that. So I think I'll be okay. I remember I was playing in a Rogue Trader event at my friendly local game store, and one of the guys playing that day had a full Imperial Guard infantry army that was 100% Halo miniature proxies. I don't think he had a single actual Games Workshop model in that army. And actually, I saw him again when I was playing at the Dragonfall qualifiers. And once again, he still had the same army. I think he brought some Aquilons that were actual Games Workshop. But other than that, I think they were literally 100% Halo proxies. Sometimes the real mini just doesn't capture the feels of what you want it to be. Like this captain or this lieutenant that I'm working on for my Black Templar. This is the store anniversary model for 2022 Space Marine Captain, but I'm using him as a lieutenant because in my Black Templar army, this guy isn't just generic lieutenant. He's generic lieutenant who is baby Helbrechts. He carries a power fist and a plasma pistol, and he carries the Seal of Sigismund, and he basically turns into mini Helbrecht with all of the different buffs and abilities that I give him. And so if I don't have 130 points for Helbrecht, I pay, I think, 95 points for Lieutenant with upgrades, and then he is baby Helbrecht. And so maybe he is just a hair fancier than regular Space Marine Lieutenant, but he is the perfect representation of what I need him to be. An important thing when picking what model to use as a proxy is if it has the same vibes as the original miniature, or if it shows off to your opponent exactly what it is meant to be. Like, this is a fancy Space Marine with plasma pistol and power fist, and that is what he is in the game. So this is a perfect proxy. Some other things in my army that kind of aren't perfect proxies are a bunch of my kill teams. For my Chaos Space Marine Legionaries, I painted them up as the Night Lords, and I was also reading the Night Lords trilogy at the time, and there's some really fun human characters in those books, and so it made me think about the difference between Chaos Space Marines versus Space Marines. Space Marines are different than human beings, and they don't really mix very well, but Chaos Space Marines, they don't really care. Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows, only that it flows. And so for Chaos Space Marines, one operative that I needed for my kill team was a sorcerer. And so I found this really cool vampire mini from Carnival, which is another board game. And I kit bashed, and oops, this is a little bit loose. I kit bashed these little skulls for her shooting fire. Because I feel like the Chaos Space, number one, Night Lords don't typically have magic wielders in their army, but I wanted an operative in the game. And so I thought, well, if I don't really want to make a Night Lord sorcerer, maybe they just found a random psyker who happens to like match the power level of the Space Marines, and so they just bring her along on missions. Like, why not? They don't care. There's no duty and honor with the Chaos Space Marines. They just need to get stuff done. In the Night Lords books, the Thunderhawk gunship is piloted by a human because there's only like 8 of the guys. They don't have enough guys to waste one driving the ship. And so a human being, I imagine a human sitting in the Adeptus Astartes chair, and it's like a little Tykes, like he's just like a little baby in the controls, just trying to wrestle the machine spirit so he can actually fly this thing. I think it's a really fun way of expressing the difference between Chaos Space Marines and Space Marines, and it makes for a really fun painting and modeling opportunity for my Night Lords. But I do have to make sure that my opponent is aware, by the way, that guy is a Space Marine. It's just, it looks different. But it painted up in the same colors with the same bases. Like, it works pretty well. And with my Tempestus Scion kill team, I did something very similar. So a Scion kill team, which I don't think is a thing in the game anymore. Well, the Aquilon Scions are in the game now, but before you could bring just regular Scions. And so you're just supposed to bring 10, 2 boxes of 5. But I thought, wouldn't it be much cooler and much more thematic if my Scion commander was an Inquisitor? Plopping down 9 Scions and Inquisitor onto a battlefield just is immediately more thematic. It's like we're on a mission. This Inquisitor needs to do some business, and so she brought some backup in the Scions. And so that is more interesting to me than just 9 Scions and then 1 Scion who's wearing a hat. Kyria Draxus is a little bit more of a bad proxy because she has a Power Fist and a Shuriken catapult, where this model should probably have a Power Fist and I think a bolt pistol or a plasma pistol. But it's an Eldar gun, it's a fancy pistol, so what's the difference between a fancy pistol and a plasma pistol? It's kind of the same exact thing. She's got this little dragon thing, but I think the general could have like advanced optics or some kind of an enhancement that gave her some ability to see a little bit more of the battlefield. So maybe the bird is representing that. Maybe it's just rule of cool. I wanted it in my army. And so I really like my Scion kill team. Sometimes Games Workshop doesn't give you much of a choice when it comes to proxying. They're usually pretty good about actually selling a model if that model has rules, unless you're a Dark Eldar player. If you're a Dark Eldar player, they literally don't sell the models. And so I found these proxies online for grotesques. And even if I wanted Games Workshop grotesques, there was only ever one sculpt that was available in Finecast for a little while. And so if I wanted to run a squad of 3, which is a min squad, I would have the same exact bad Finecast sculpt. These guys are really, really fun, but they are a good proxy. They have the fists, the grotesque fists, and they have a gun that can very reasonably represent the like weird flamer torrent pistol that does not ignore cover. I don't know why, but none of the Dark Eldar flamer guns ignore cover. It doesn't make any sense. I guess because instead of shooting like fire, they shoot goo. And so goo can be blocked by cover, but I don't know. I feel like it's just an oversight. Now these grotesques are pretty darn close to the Games Workshop grotesques, but one little thing I did to make them a little bit more Games Workshop-y is I replaced their heads with the masks from the Talos and Chronos Pain Engine. So there is an actual Dark Eldar bit that is the focal point of these miniatures, and so it helps sell them as these are appropriate proxies, or they're really darn close to the official Games Workshop miniatures. And so I don't think my opponent would, they're standing on the right bases, they're the right size, they're flayed flesh really shows off the grotesqueness about them. These are perfect proxies. And speaking of a perfect proxy, this really isn't a proxy, it is just the real thing. But this is a demon prince, but it is not the modern plastic demon prince. It is not even the old plastic demon prince. It is the old Nurgle Death Guard demon prince that Games Workshop sold. I think it left the web store in like 2017 or 18. It's been gone a long time, but I happen to have one and I put on these wings. These wings are from they're from the Age of Sigmar Nurgle, like Plague Lord on Superfly. And I just used the wings. And so I don't think I'm gonna run this guy as a Demon Prince with wings, because Demon Prince with wings, kind of a iffy unit. They have good movement, but they kind of lack in some other aspects. But what's kind of perfect about this figure is he's fat. And so it's very believable that, you know, maybe these magical wings can get him off the ground. But if I just say, by the way, he's not a Demon Prince with wings, he's too fat to fly on these tiny little fly wings. And so this is a perfect proxy as either Demon Prince or Demon Prince with wings. And he's just a little bit more plaguey than the modern plastic Demon Prince kit, which is a glorious kit and I think would look beautiful in a Khorne or Slaanesh or Tzeentch army. But for Nurgle, I want something a little bit more like this. When it comes to Games Workshop, I feel like proxies are a little bit easier because a lot of the units are just a thing with a little bit of a 40K varnish on top of it. But for truly miniature agnostic games, you do actually have to hunt down your own feelings about what the miniatures should be. And personally, I don't really like miniatures agnostics games because it's not doing the work for me. Like, I can get into a game, but it have to be in the perfect right mood to be inspired, you know, just reading the rules and then say, okay, I want this and this and this and this and this model. But if you provide models to me, I can get in the mood. I can be like, ooh, that's some neat, like, demon-y stuff. I want to paint those models. A miniatures agnostic game that did catch my eye though is a game called Don't Look Back. It is essentially a RPG where one person plays as the killer and then other people play as like the teenagers, and you basically just act out a horror movie. And this has given me a lovely opportunity to buy whatever models catch my eye and just paint them up, and they're for this game. It's a little bit of a tricky game to play. I'm still reading the rule book and it is a dense rule book, but I'm very excited to play it. And I have been kit bashing and converting and painting some really, really fun miniatures. This is a spooky, scary scarecrow man that was really, really fun to paint. And this is, I think this is a Reaper Bones princess that I put a scary skull face on. And so now she's a cultist and would do a really good job of murdering some teenagers in a generic horror movie. It's given me a wonderful opportunity to just buy whatever models catch my eye and then paint them up for a good reason. Because as much as I love miniatures, if they're not gonna be in a game, it kind of takes a lot of the joy out of it for me, because part of the fun of painting a miniature is knowing, hey, this is gonna be in a game one day. I'm gonna put this on the tabletop and people are gonna see it and we're gonna play with it and it's gonna die and it's gonna do stuff and it's gonna be interesting. If I'm just painting like a model to paint a model, it's just kind of a statue and it'll be on my desk, where it probably won't because I have a really tiny desk and I don't have a lot of room for stuff. But I like when a company actually gives me the miniatures, because then I just have to get into it. I don't have to actually make any decisions. The only decisions I have to make is what color. What color am I gonna paint my guys? And that's a really fun decision. Some other really fun proxies that I've been working on is for my Dark Eldar, because once again, Games Workshop doesn't sell enough Dark Eldar miniatures, and so I have to make do with what I can find. This is my Dark Eldar Archon, and this is the official model for an Archon. Although the hands have been swapped, usually the Archon is like doing a hands across the chest thing. I just put on some regular arms from the Kabalite kit, but this guy is super, super fun. I've got him almost done. The only thing left is his sword and his face. I gave him the mask from one of the Reaver jet bikes, and what I would like to do is I would like to have like a digital face or like the projection of a face on the inside of his helmet. I don't know how I would ever pull that off with paint, but I would like to give it a try. The inspiration is, if anybody watched the Astartes like mini series or like short film on YouTube, there's that moment where the Inquisitor like screams because the forces of chaos have grabbed him and his face is like projected on the front of his mask. And so I want to do that exact same thing on this guy. But in my Dark Eldar list, I need another Archon. And for that, I found another proxy model. Originally, I bought this figure to use as Yvraine, but I don't want Yvraine in my list anymore. And so she is going to be the Archon that pals around with my Incubi. I think she works kind of well as an Archon because Archons are just Dark Eldar who have managed to reach a position of power in Dark Eldar society. And so I do like that I have like a dude Archon in Cabalite gear because he'd be palling around with the Cabalites. But I do like having a different style of Dark Eldar hero, something a little bit more like if I had the opportunity to, I'd like to attach her to like a cabal of witches because she is a little bit more witchy than Cabalite-y. But she does have the appropriate war gear. She has the Husk Blade, which is a really, really powerful close combat weapon that the Archons get to have. And she just is a Dark Eldar. Like, Dark Eldar are really, really, really evil. Like, super crazy evil. Like, Chaos is bad, but like Chaos, they still like live lives. The Dark Eldar are really, really dark. And I was able to find a really, really dark model for my Urian Rakarth. Urian Rakarth is the named character for the Raks. And the Dark Eldar Raks are basically, if anybody has seen the movie Event Horizon, when they go into the ship's databanks and they see what happens to the previous crew, and it's a pretty, you'd remember the scene. It's that, but worse. And I've been working on painting this figure up. I really like the Raks. Like, they're really grotesque, but they're also really, really creepy. And I make them with like flayed skin. They no longer have any skin, but they like it. Like that's their vibe. They like having no skin, and they probably, right before battle, they probably like douse themselves in some salt just to make it hurt more because they enjoy pain. Actually, they have a real power from pain. They also have a really fun ability where the thing of Dark Eldar is I get a pain token when I kill an enemy unit. I also get a pain token when Raks die because they enjoy it. And so I actually get a benefit when these characters die. But this is a perfect proxy model because it's the most horrifying thing I've ever seen. But it's also like horrifying in like an attractive way. Like the Raks, they don't seem like they're doing that great. They don't seem happy about it. But this is a very, very ugly, gross, disgusting model that's cool about the grossness. And it's Pinhead. And I really, really like the Pinhead movies. Actually, I don't like the Pinhead movies. I like the Hellraiser movies. Hellraiser 1 and 2, excellent. Really, really good horror movies. You can probably skip all of the rest of, there's like 13. They kept making them, not very good, but the first two, really, really good. And so this is Pinhead, but they've also got the Lament configuration, which is a perfect representation of the Casket of Flensing. The Casket of Flensing is the ranged weapon for Urian Rakarth. It is a once per game D6 shots, anti-infantry 2-up devastating wounds. It's really, really powerful, but 3d6 shots once per game. That could be 18 shots. That could be 3 shots. It's a little bit of a roll of the dice. And I mean, that's what happens when the Lamont configuration gets solved. It's a puzzle cube. And when that happens, the Cenobites show up and literally hell breaks loose. All hell breaks loose. And Pinhead is the head honcho of the Cenobites. And so I'm really excited to have this model in my collection. And I'm sure Games Workshop is going to update Urian Rakarth and all of the Dark Eldar units, but I don't know. They would have to try pretty hard to make a model that is as grotesque and as horrifying as I would want my Raks to be, because Raks are really, really gross. Also, Raks are Dark Eldar, so the grotesques are not Dark Eldar. They're just dudes who have been turned into Raks, where the actual Raks are Dark Eldar who are just completely lost in the sauce of being in pain. They enjoy it, like, to a weird degree. Working on my Dark Eldar army has been a really fun challenge because I do have to just invent some miniatures that I can't actually buy. And it does make me think, like, some of the coolest things I have seen in other people's Warhammer armies is when things get a little silly, when things get, when things are a little bit different than the Games Workshop box art. I remember seeing a really cool Adeptus Mechanicus army that had some Cataphron robots. And the Cataphrons, they're like those 50s sci-fi robots, and they have a little computer face. And so he actually painted like emojis and stuff in their faceplate. And like, it's really fun, and it adds a really, really nice detail to his army, and it makes it really, really unique. I think a regular bog standard 40k army is perfectly fine. It's perfectly great, but you know, stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit and playing with something a little bit weird can make the game a lot more interesting. They're my dudes. I'm gonna run them any way I want. And if my opponent complains, a really good way, if like your opponent's like, that's not the real model, that's not right. Like if they're really putting up a fuss, then you could ask them if you could borrow a mini. And then that leads to a really fun game too. Because what if their borrowed mini does really good in game? And so you're like, oh, my Urian Rakarth, which by the way is one of your Space Marine scouts, is crushing it this game. Isn't it crazy that your model turncoat for my army and is now just kicking butt? Or if they just get wiped off the board, that's also funny because then your opponent killed their own model. I think that's a really good way to handle like in the moment proxies. Proxy models don't always have to be a whole thing. It can be as simple as my Wave Serpents or Fire Prisms this game, or my Scout Sentinels or Armored Sentinels this game. That's usually completely fine because if it's literally the same model, but you just didn't paint it the right colors for that game, I think it's totally fair for you to just run it however you want in that game. Sometimes it gets a little bit frustrating if your army, if like that particular unit has a lot of very specific war gear that's important for your opponent to know. I remember in early games of 10th edition with Sean, when he was using his old school Cadians, it was really annoying that every single squad had like 2 Meltas, 2 Long Lazes, 2 plasma guns, a plasma pistol, and a partridge in a pear tree. And I was just, you know, being like, yeah, I'm sure all of your things have all of the things, even though they're all literally the same easy to build Cadian from 2010. If you have kind of an obnoxious unit, you should try to get as close to WYSIWYG as possible. But sometimes there is some fun in figuring out some other ways around getting those units. Proxy miniatures have definitely grown on me over the years. I mean, I have thousands of miniatures, and almost exclusively I have the real thing because I usually fell in love with the real model. But every now and then, I see something that catches my eye a little bit more than the real thing. And those are some of my favorite models in my collection. Let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think of proxy models? What are some really cool proxy models that you have? And, you know, do you play with proxy models? I know some people get really nervous that they're not gonna be allowed to use proxy models at stores, and Warhammer stores sometimes can be a little persnickety about real versus fake models, but friendly local game stores, usually anything goes. If you ask nicely, you probably could get away with buttons and pennies. Thanks for watching.